This video introduces NeuroLogic Core, Lessons in Regulation, an advanced tier, 6-part intervention designed for students struggling with self-regulation and executive functioning. School-based mental health professionals walk students through these lessons to help them build their unique regulation plans. Your role is essentially to be a bridge, supporting the students as they apply these skills in real time in your classroom. The goal? Empowering students to master their own regulation until they no longer need advanced support. Hi, I'm Dr. Kat DeVries, Program Director of NeuroLogic by Lakeside. To begin, I'm going to tell you a little story. One day my husband and I were walking in our neighborhood and he was talking to me, and I'm a therapist, so I was giving him my attention, using my listening skills, hearing what he had to say. And then I noticed that there was a pretty large dog a couple of yards down. I was still listening to him, but I was keeping an eye on the dog. And then as we got closer, I saw the dog wasn't on a leash. So I thought, okay, it must be behind one of those invisible fences. Back to the husband. I can hear what he's saying. And then as we got a little closer, I saw the dog walk onto the sidewalk, and I realized, oh no, there's no invisible fence. And I started to get really concerned, and I wasn't listening to my husband quite as much. And then really not much at all. And then the dog came running straight towards us, and I instantly slid behind my husband, and I automatically wrapped my arms around his arms, pulling his arms behind him and pushing his face towards the dog, trying to protect myself. Not my proudest moment. Now, what does this have to do with you, your students, or this advanced tier intervention? It has to do with the neuroscience behind what happens to us when we start to feel a stress response in our body. So let's take a look at this slide and let's try to make sense of my behavior. At the beginning of my walk with my husband, the area of my brain that I was functioning out of was my cortex. That's the blue section at the top in this diagram. So I could hear instructions, I could listen to complex stories he was telling me, and I was attending to him. And then as the dog got closer, I started to move towards functioning out of my brainstem, the fight, flight, freeze part of my brain. And you can see that in the red on the slide. My attention shifted away from my husband and locked onto the stressor. And so my heart rate went up. Now, other people might have fainted when they saw the dog. That's a heart rate going way down. Students have both stress responses. You might notice some students become more energetic and others look dazed or even sleepy when they have a stress response. Also, my functional IQ was not what it typically is. It doesn't make any sense to pin my protector's arms behind his back. I wasn't thinking about future consequences either, about what my husband was going to say after I basically shoved him towards this dog. It wasn't future thinking at all. Now, this is what happens to our students in class as well. They might see a social media post that made them feel really bad about themselves, or maybe they had an upsetting conversation in the hallway. The stress could even come from us as teachers. Maybe we're people that tend to stand close to someone when we're having a conversation, and that proximity makes the student feel stressed. Whatever it might be, the stress response moves them from their cortex, which is really where all of our executive functioning is, down to operating out of these lower brain regions. And the students end up in the same brain state that I was in. The same way that the dog was distracting me, their stressors are distracting them in your class. That's when we start seeing this reactive behavior happening in our classrooms, kind of like my reactive behavior, where we're pulled from our opportunity to teach because the students are in this stress response. This is where NeuroLogic Core Lessons in Regulation comes in. As students walk through the 6 lessons with their group facilitator, they learn about this neuroscience. They learn about how their brain responds to stressors and how they can create a self-regulation plan. This intervention is available in 4 different grade bands. pre-K and kindergarten, elementary, middle, and high school. Each version differs in their presentation, in the imagery, in the vocabulary, but they each teach the same core lessons and they guide students through the creation of an individualized regulation plan. The pre-K and kindergarten self-regulation plan looks like a television remote control that can be cut out and kept on hand. They can pause and move forward with their regulation strategies. It's a visual reminder for them. In elementary, middle, and high school, the content gets incrementally more advanced, giving kids an age-appropriate, deeper dive into these topics. They still do self-regulation plans that they can share with the trusted school staff, and it's something that they can be held accountable to. School staff can cue them with just a real quick, "Are you working on your self-regulation plan here?" It's important to note that the goal is not that the same students would repeat this intervention year after year. Instead, it's that they would participate in their age-appropriate grade-level lessons when they need that, and that this intervention would equip them with the skills and strategies so that they no longer need advanced tier support. The first step in creating the self-regulation plan is identifying triggers. So for me, I was nervous about dogs. But for students, they're going to have triggers related to school. They're going to have triggers about grades or loud voices or maybe even moments of silence. The school-based mental health professional helps the students identify the unique things that trigger them towards a stress response. Then we move on towards noticing the warning signs of dysregulation. We're asking the students to notice, what are your thought patterns? Are you catastrophizing? Do you have a physical response? Is your heart rate going up? Do you feel sweaty or do you feel cold? These are the signs that will tell them, oh, I'm starting to get dysregulated. And then they can write those down on the paper like, yes, these are my warning signs. Then the intervention gives them a bunch of strategies. They practice different brain breaks, breathing patterns, and other responses to dysregulation. For example, how does large motor movement shift how I feel? What if I'm working at a stand-up desk? Does that feel different? And then most importantly, we have them identify relationships in our school community that are regulating to them. Are there adults that they can go to talk to about these challenges and strategies? Maybe the student says, I do great, but then lunchtime is really stressful to me, and that's when I want to skip school. They can talk about these hot spots with different key people that they feel really regulated with. And then when they're finished with this 6-lesson group, they have this self-regulating plan that can be shared with you. And you can see the things that are particularly triggering for that student. You'll see the warning signs that they've identified. So when the student starts to demonstrate these signs, you can cue them, hey, do you want to try one of the strategies that you know help yourself to become more regulated? And that will allow you to stay in my class longer. Or maybe they aren't able to stay in your class, and so they have to leave, but they go to that point person that we know is very regulating to them, and that person walks them through their self-regulation plan. This is what the NeuroLogic Core Lessons in Regulation does for our students. So we're asking you, if you know students that are in these groups that are running in your school, find out what their regulation plan is. Help them practice in real time. Remember that students are going to develop, and development means incremental changes. We don't expect the students to go through this 6 lessons, come up with a regulation plan, and then magically, dramatically be different one day later. We expect them to stay in class longer, to be more regulated, which means less reactive, to manage challenges, name their emotions, and be able to work towards reconciliation with others in school. But they're going to be small incremental changes until they no longer need advanced support. Your role is to take the opportunity to bridge the gap between what the students learn through NeuroLogic Core Lessons in Regulation and what their experience is in the classroom. in the hallway and in the cafeteria. Help them put the strategies to the test when the stressors arrive. Be encouraged. Enjoy celebrating the small wins with your student as they learn these key lifelong skills that will make them even more effective in the classroom as well.